This week, the popular writer John Pavlovitz posted an essay to his blog which was titled, "The Extinction of the White Male Dinosaur." He noted that as the 116th Congress was sworn in this week, it is the most diverse Congress in our country's history. Congress looks more like America, the America we actually live in, than at any previous time in history. And yet, there is still a long, long way to go so that white Christian males are not the overwhelming majority. National Public Radio did a story this week on the Pew Research Center's report on the religious affiliation of the members of this new Congress. And falling just over 2%, Congress is now only 88% Christian. This makes Congress far more Christian than the country, which, depending on which study and survey you read, is anywhere from 65 to 71% Christian at best. It's a start. The same NPR report noted there are two Unitarian Universalists in this Congress. One is Amarish Babulal of the 7th California District, who is starting his third term, and the other is Judy Chu, the first Chinese-American woman ever elected to Congress, who is starting her 6th term from California's 27th District. Catholics make up the biggest plurality with 163, or 30% of the Congress. The second largest group is non-affiliated, non-denominational Christians. There are 80 of those, about 15% of the total. There are also 72 Baptists, 42 Methodists, 26 each of Episcopalians, Presbyterians, and Lutherans, 10 Mormons, 4 Congregationalists, and 0 Quakers. This Congress has the most non-Christians ever in Congress, 63 out of 535. 63 non-Christians are 12% of the Congress. But non-Christians make up around 30% of the population. The non-Christians in the Congress include 32 Jews, 3 Hindus, 3 Muslims, 2 Buddhists, and 1 unaffiliated person, Kyrsten Sinema, the new senator from Arizona, who claimed no religious affiliation. She was the only one. That's really strange because the religiously unaffiliated who claim no religious tradition, the nuns we've heard of, make up about 1/4 of the US population. We know there are a record number of women in this Congress, but that still counts for only 25% of Congress in a country that is more than 51% female. There is a record number of racial minorities and queer people in this Congress, but their numbers too fall short of their percentage in the general population. The best we've ever done leaves us an astounding and astonishing long, long way to go. In his essay, Pavlovitz notes the white male dinosaur is not going to go quietly into that good night. Not going to go quietly to history's scrap heap. Quite the contrary. He notes the dinosaurs are raging against the light and are going to fight, kick, and scream all the way to their deathbed. This will probably mean our politics gets uglier before it gets better. But the numbers aren't going to change. We are steadily headed towards a diverse, beloved community. 5 years ago, I wrote a similar blog post to this titled, "The Last Stand of the Angry Old White Straight Christian Man." I noted at that time, demographically, that those folks' time in charge is coming to an end, and they sense it, and it makes them scared and angry. They are like a cornered wild animal. Now, a cornered wild animal is going to lose. but it's still very, very dangerous. Just watch a YouTube video of animal control officers trying to get a cornered mountain lion or bear or raccoon even. I'm going to guess that most of you, if not all of you, join me in happily cheering the most diverse Congress ever. It's another decided step forward toward creating the country we dream about. The long march toward beloved community has so far taken us through a revolution to split from England, an extermination of the indigenous inhabitants of the continent, a civil war to end slavery, an ongoing civil rights struggle against the white supremacist history of Jim Crow and mass incarceration, and ongoing battles for the equality for women, queer people, immigrants, and religious minorities. It hasn't been easy. Some of this history is ugly, and so ugly we don't like to admit to it or to its full impact, not only on how we live, but how we even perceive the reality in which we live. And yet, we march forward, better, inch by inch, generation by generation. And yet, still a long way to go to reach the world we dream about. Our new members of Congress, dancing their ways into their new offices, are going to run into a lesson that we all learn over and over again. Creating the world we want, creating the life we want, happens in fits and starts. Even for those who seem to have it all, and for those who have seemed to walk right into all their dreams coming true. There is a history of fits and starts, fears and anxieties, failures and learning from them, and just plain old dumb mistakes to go along with the progress, the successes, the insight, the better understanding, and the victories. The core reason our country is so conflicted right now is that older, rich, white, straight Christian men are, for the first time in our history, having to deal with the fact that their days of a privileged position, their days of being more immune to life's difficulties in our culture than others, are going to end, and sooner rather than later. They are scared to death. They are scared of the change itself, but they are more scared of what they will lose when this change happens. They will lose their way of life. They will lose their compass. They will lose their reality. They will lose the way they were taught to navigate the world, which now seems to be being switched out for some GPS system that you can speak to in any language in the world. They're lost, anxious, scared. Actual progress for our society means actual, real, painful loss for the rich, old, white Christian men and those who share their values. And yet this has to be. We no longer live in the old dispensation. We live in a world where fairness, justice, and equality are freedoms and rights that have been tasted and cannot be untasted by everyone on the planet. And they cannot be unimagined. We live in a world where it is no longer accepted but ignorant to believe one group, one gender, one color, one religion, one language, one sexuality, one gender expression, one historically and socially located group is inherently better than another. We live in a time where the ways we've always done it, government, healthcare, education, isn't working for us anymore. We live in a time where if we don't apply what we've learned from science about how our planetary ecosystem works, we will actually, and in all reality, kill our own planet and we will all die. If we step back, what sane, rich, white, old man wouldn't want to bury his head in the sand and or rage against all of this? When people are scared, especially when they're scared of losing their way, losing their power, losing their feelings of control, losing their feeling of safety, they will say and do almost anything to prevent it or to not have to deal with it. They will blame and scapegoat. All our society's problems come from the others. It's the Jews' fault. It's the blacks' fault. It's the uppity women's fault. It's the gays' fault. It's the immigrants' fault. It's the Muslims' fault. They will rant and rave and not understand why some people can't share their point of view. After all, their perspective is the correct perspective. Their correct perspective is the way it's always been. That marriage is between one man and one woman. Isn't it obvious women should stay in the home and take care of children? America is obviously a Christian nation where we speak English. The old white men are throwing a tantrum. If everyone did it just their way, everything would be fine, even great again. What's wrong with the way we've always done it? Now, virtually all of you, I'm sure, are imagining the people I'm talking about. Nazis, deplorables, MAGAs, conservatives, Republicans, rednecks, however you're imagining it, I'm going to guarantee just about all of you are there. But stop. Back up. And think for a minute how this situation in our Congress and our country is exactly like what's going on in congregations around the country. Just like the situation facing our government, education, and healthcare systems and our social norms and mores, the way we've always done it isn't working at church anymore either. What's wrong with those people who don't value the Bible and the Lord's Prayer? What's wrong with those people who don't like the old hymns? What's wrong with those people who won't show up to help teach religious education? Some of them don't even want to have church on Sunday mornings because of soccer. And just like in the rest of the world, in the nation's congregations, there is blaming and scapegoating. Things are wrong at church because everyone isn't thinking the right way, like I do. It's the religious education director's fault. My personal favorite, it's the minister's fault. It's the new people's fault. What's wrong with the way we've done things? How come the new people can't do it our way? What do you mean we're not friendly and welcoming? And if right now you're thinking, wait a minute, that's not exactly the same thing, let me assure you that it is, in fact, exactly the same thing. The fear and anxiety of loss that goes with change, and change is yet to come, is staggering in any setting, and the reactions to it are almost always the same. James Luther Adams says church is the place where we practice being human. How can we heal and move forward the divisions in our society if we can't do that in our congregations? Notice what's happening in this new diverse Congress. Many of this freshman class are unafraid to speak of things that were actually political suicide 5 years ago. Socialism, Medicare for all, single-payer health care, free public college education, guaranteed basic income, increasing taxes on the wealthy, ranked choice voting, automatic voter registration, election day as a national holiday. No politician in their right mind would have openly spoke of all this stuff 5 years ago even. All the people who have traditionally been left out are organizing, working hard, dreaming of what's possible, and getting elected, instead of just complaining about the way things are and the way things don't work anymore. And they're showing up with new voices, new ideas, new approaches, new attitudes, new possibilities, which is our theme for the month. What if we did this in our churches and congregations? Instead of focusing on fear, what if we focus on what's possible? Before anything can happen, someone has to believe it is possible. Hope is built on possibilities. No plan or fate is ever completely fixed forever. One of the cornerstones of our faith is revelation is not sealed. There's always more to learn. Where possibility runs into its greatest barrier, greatest challenge, comes from all things economics. Two phenomena described in economic theory can stop change in its tracks. The first is something that economists call for real the endowment effect. And this is that people ascribe more value to things because they already own them. Something you have and own in your possession will be seen as more valuable than something that you do not own or do not have in your possession, regardless of the objective value of those things. The second phenomenon is related to this. It's what economists call loss aversion. Most people would rather avoid losing money than acquire more. Think about that for a second. Most people would rather avoid losing money than risk acquiring more. In fact, the psychological impact of losing is thought to be by psychologists twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining, no matter how good the gain might be. So when we think about the difficulty of moving a society or a congregation forward, we deal with very real and very common psychological opposition. People will value what they already have more than anything they might acquire, even if what they might acquire might in reality be worth more. And people would rather avoid losing capital, be it actual money and financial capital or political capital, than they would gain more by a factor of 2 to 1. So when the old white dinosaurs in Congress can't see the beloved community our society might build, it's because they value the society they already know much more than any new idea. And they can't even imagine a new society could in any way possibly be better. And they would rather avoid losing the power and privilege they have than possibly gaining more by becoming part of the change in the new dispensation. In our congregations, we literally have endowments which we value more than whatever we might possibly buy or invest in with them, even if it's our own survival. And it's no surprise longtime members of a congregation would rather avoid losing things they know and like at church, be it members or friends or something said or done in worship or an annual event, than acquire new people, new energy, and new ideas. This is why even discussing change and new possibilities is difficult. We hold on to what we already have and would rather not lose it than gain something better by a 2 to 1 margin. The power of fear of loss is immense. But change doesn't need to be something to be feared. It is, in fact, the playing field of life, of reality. Will we be controlled by change? Will we put so much strength and effort into resisting it that we can't form it and shape it into a more pleasing and acceptable shape? Think for a minute, and this is not rhetorical. Think for a minute about some of these reflection questions from our Soul Matters resources on possibilities. Think. What did your childhood and family of origin teach you about new possibilities? Are those lessons ones you need to remember or need to forget? What are others learning about living and leaning into possibility by watching you? Is it possible the thing you want is not actually the thing you need? Is it possible that the thing you are sure you are right about is wrong? Is "that was unfair" or "I was wronged" keeping you from the possibilities of moving on? Are you sure you're too old to do it? Are you sure it's too late to try? Might there be more to see in your enemy than what you have been staring at in them? Is it possible that both your loved one and your loathed one are doing the best they possibly can, and finally need forgiveness for not living up to who you want them to be? does this exercise scare the living daylights out of you? Are you scared of what might happen in our country? Are you scared of what might happen in our congregational conversation after the service is over? Creating the life we want, the world we dream about for ourselves, for our society, for our church, happens in fits. And sometimes they are actual fits, arguments, tantrums, hurts, taking my ball and going homes, fits, and starts and stops, and starting agains and stopping agains, and successes and failures. Possibility doesn't come wrapped up in a New Year's gift box. You just open what you've hoped for, and there it is. Possibility requires courage. We must be brave enough to consider the possibilities. We must be brave enough to give up certainty and assume an emotional and intellectual posture of curiosity. We must be brave enough to give up some of our personal preferences for the good of the group, trusting that others will too. Possibility requires trusting that there are indeed enough resources within us and those around us and the world around us to justify hope and optimism. And this optimism is another cornerstone of our UU faith. We believe there are enough resources, human and divine, to justify hope. Considering possibilities doesn't have to be fearful. It can indeed be hopeful. The way it's always been is safe, but limiting. Ships, they say, are safest in port, but that's not what the ship is for. We may need ideas, practices, customs, and programs that are brand new to all of us. But instead of thinking of this as too risky to chance, how does our approach and attitude change if we think of it as too risky not to chance? Possibility unleashes creativity. Possibility unleashes energy. Possibility and creative energy are attractive. People will want to do it with you. Possibility unshackles us from the way we've always done it, so we can create together the way we need to do it from now on. Possibility enables us not only to move forward, but to create a future even more glorious and storied than our past.